Yo. Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal podcast, The Wire Remixed, Season 3, Episode 12. Mission accomplished. We are here, season finale of Season 3. Um, this episode was directed by Ernest Dickerson, ranked by Vulture ninth all time in terms of Wire episodes. And the epigraph, of course, it was "We fight on that lie." One Slim Charles. Themes: I had McNulty and Avon, tired of fighting, and also was it worth it? Very interesting episode because you're following you're following a classic, a beyond classic. You're following an iconic episode, episode 11, and there was nothing that happened in this particular episode that was that was surprising. Like we knew these things that happened in episode 11, we knew they were going to happen. They were inevitable. I guess I would compare this episode to. I guess this episode to me has aged well from a standpoint not only from when it first came out, but also from watching it and then doing research on it, preparing for this podcast, because I realized that this episode this was a tricky episode from the standpoint of you have to prepare for season 4. It's like this, I could make a case that this was season 4. This was like half of season 4 was in this episode in terms of some of the stuff that we saw, and that episode 11 was really the season finale of season 3. Very, very tricky for the writers to kind of gauge, to kind of bridge that gap between ending season 3 and beginning season 4. But as usual, the writers, they did it perfectly to a T. Opening scene, we go to Bunk McNulty. They're at the crime scene, which, of course, at the crime scene where Stringer had been shot and killed by Omar and Muzon. And you see McNulty despondent over the fact that Stringer doesn't know that he was caught on the wire. You kind of see Bunk, control him, tap on the shoulder. You also see Rawls, asking questions about, finding out, telling Bunk or telling the officers who were on the scene how much money was on that ambulance truck in regards to Andy Krawcheck. Because you had received a call from the mayor's office. We know Krawcheck was a part of the mayor's team as well on the ticket. And you see that Bunk immediately kind of recognizes the ammo that was recognizes the shells from the shotgun, of course, from Omar. You can see him. You can see his wheels are spinning when he looks at some of those shell casings on the scene. And then the final cut, of course, is the closing the bag of Stringer Bell, which of course would be the last time we see Stringer Bell in this series, of course. Very opening scene that made perfect sense. They're going to follow up with with regards to what happened to Stringer Bell, kind of closing the chapter on that book, so to speak, in terms of seeing him. But of course we'll get more Stringer Bell in terms of his decision making and the collateral damage from that later on in this episode. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I view this scene as kind of like the beginning of like the final metamorphosis of Jim McNulty. I really like that line that he had where he goes, he never, like, I had him. He's talking to Bunk. I had him,
right,
and he'll never know it.
Right.
That's kind of like that's the beginning of the final metamorphosis of McNulty, which will take place over the course of this episode.
We go to Cuddy and Grace. They are discussing, Cuddy's progress of what he's done with the boxing. She mentions that she never was into boxing, and Cuddy, makes one last advance at Grace, hoping, why not? Why not shoot a shot? Of course, she respectfully pushes back, and kind of backs off and says, it's good seeing you, and keeps it moving. So Cuddy, feeling good about himself, and rightfully so. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Nope. Don't disagree with anything he said.
We get to Avon and Slim Charles. So immediately Avon, before Slim Charles even walks in the room, we see all the Barksdale soldiers gathering up and discussing what's transpired. We see Bodie saying, back in the day, shit like this would have never happened, things like that, and then waiting for orders from Slim Charles. And we see Avon completely shut down Shamrock. He just never has no regard for Shamrock whatsoever. Of course, we know that Stringer's guy, and tells him, shut that fucking door. And then we see Slim Charles come in the room, say, hey, we're gonna bounce back on Marlowe. He's gonna fall. And then Avon comes clean to Slim Charles, basically doesn't give him every detail, but basically says that, hey, this wasn't Marlowe. Marlowe couldn't have got the Stringer like that. He died because of some other shit. Slim Charles is, surprised by that. And Avon says, hey, I tried to fix it, but I couldn't. He says, Stringer was right about all this, fuck this beef, fuck these corners, and fuck Marlowe. And basically Avon is in similar to McNulty, is despondent as well, and questioning, all, this going to war in general. And you hear Slim Charles basically say, look, if it's a lie, then we fight on that lie, but we got to fight. He says, once you're in it, you're in it. And Avon doesn't respond. But listen, Avon knows that Slim Charles, from that standpoint, is right, knowing the fact that knowing that Avon is a general, more is a soldier himself. So he understands that, that creed and what Slim Charles is saying. But again, Avon at this point seemed to be just, done fighting. What were your thoughts on this scene? A very powerful scene from the standpoint that Avon came clean to Slim Charles.
Yeah, Avon's going through it in this one. Yeah, you can definitely tell, like he's questioning like a lot of the decisions and the choices and the actions, and it shows when you talk about like the overall trickiness of this episode. The big thing that needed to happen was that they show the consequences of the actions of what happened in last episode. And a lot, you're right, in a lot of shows that would have been like the season finale, and they would have saved all of the fallout for the next season. And for The Wire, it's important that each of their seasons are contained with the beginning, middle, and end. And so a big part of that end had to be what was going to be the emotional impact on these characters after their emotional resolution, as well as like the actual resolutions that we saw. And so this is, just like you said, McNulty, you're seeing the emotional impact on Avon Barksdale.
We go back to Bunk and McNulty. Bunk finds the cell chips from Stringer's phone. He also tells McNulty that we have a warrant for the search for his place. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out. That definitely was a setup scene for them going to check out Stringer's place. Carcetti and Teresa DiGascino, of course, they're going over Amsterdam and what his next move is going to be. She's telling him to, or maybe we haven't gotten that far yet, where she is telling him to say the best questions for Tony Graves. So we haven't gotten that far yet, but they're basically going over what he should do moving forward with all the news that he's received from Amsterdam. What were your thoughts?
Yep. Set up.
You go to Royce. So Royce is with his chief of staff and a couple other people. The academic that we saw a couple episodes ago that was absolutely trying to sell him on Amsterdam. And then Royce is in spin mode right now. Royce is trying to spin Amsterdam, trying to convince himself that they shouldn't jump out on Amsterdam as of yet. His chief of staff has heard enough. He just walks out because he completely has been dead set against it, along with Delegate Watkins, of course. And you see Royce talking to the academic about what can be done, and then Royce is sounding desperate as he's trying to say, maybe they're not giving him the best ideas or telling him things that he wants to hear. So he gets frustrated, and at one point in the scene. What are your thoughts on Royce's actions at this point?
Yeah, this is definitely set up for later, but you can tell this is the point where he doesn't really have a plan.
Right. Yeah. And the people that, and the thing about it is the people that would help him with that plan are just like, no. So that's what this is why he's stuck. Like his chief of staff. When your chief of staff is like, yo, this is fucked up, and we can't do this, then you basically had no friends in the room. I mean, that's your chief of staff, and you got Delegate Watkins not messing with you from the standpoint of agreeing with you from in regards to Amsterdam. So Royce at this point has no allies on this in terms of his own within his own team. He has he's seeking advice from the academic, who's just an academic. The academic says, I'm not a politician, I'm an academic. So my perspective, my perspective is not from not coming from a political angle here. So we get to Kima and Freeman. They go back into detail. So they hear on the wire that that was Marlowe's crew that took out Stringer. So that was the initial talk on the wire. We'll see how that will play out. Any thoughts on that?
Set up.
McNulty and Bunk. So McNulty and Bunk go to Stringer's place. Before they walk in the door, McNulty receives a call from Colvin, saying Colvin telling him that he has something for him. McNulty looks through Stringer's place, which is obviously a penthouse on the waterfront, basically a nice place. Samurai swords. You see the book. See a lot of books. The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Saw that book, and McNulty kind of like is taken back at the place and saying that Stringer lived here, and surprised. And then of course at the end of the scene says who the fuck was I chasing? I really wasn't a fan of the scene because from a standpoint of I don't particularly know what McNulty was expecting to see in Stringer's place. Stringer he's a drug kingpin who's a multi-millionaire. How do you think he was going to be living? I don't understand why. I know that we were on this whole narrative. McNulty shifted his mindset and his attitude. We had to kind of play that up, but I like the idea that he's kind of taken back by how nice Stringer's place is and the culture from that standpoint. I kind of didn't. That kind of was. I wasn't kind of impressed with that with this particular scene from that standpoint. What were your thoughts?
So the way that I would identify what was going on in that scene. So this is another part of Nolte's metamorphosis within this episode. And so at the very end of it, he says, who the fuck was I chasing? And yeah, I mean, he's looking at different things that's in his apartment, but he's not actually talking about how his apartment looks. What he's talking about was his idea of like what a criminal should be versus what Stringer actually turned out to be when looking at his place in particular versus how he himself, McNulty, is living his life. That's the important part of this. And so like it's like I'm chasing this guy. He's doing all these things that he sees in terms of like bettering himself and how he wants to live. And
Right.
yet here I am supposedly thinking I'm better than this person.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't have anything that I necessarily like consider of value. So
yeah, that
to me was what was going on in this scene.
That's an excellent point. And I also would add to that he, I think he almost, you know, I don't think it was an insult to Stringer. I think it was a respect. I think he almost, from that standpoint, respected Stringer. Now, of course,
it's about his introspection of himself. This has nothing to do with Stringer.
Yeah, no, it was more about McNulty, but I still think that there was a respect from a standpoint.
It's not respect. It's not respect. That's the wrong word.
So you think it was all about McNulty?
No, I know it's all about McNulty. It's not think. I know it's all about McNulty.
But you know, it definitely. I mean, he definitely in that moment is questioning his own being. So with that goes. Yeah, that definitely goes without saying that he's questioning himself. From where he's in terms of how he's moving with his career and life. We go to Omar, Muson, and Dante. Of course, the job is done. Omar goes to pick up Dante from Muzone, who has him in a hotel room. He sees that Muzone has kind of knocked around Dante a little bit. Was a little bit annoyed by that. Muzone basically tells him what's done is done. Dante says, "Hey, I took it as long as I could." And then we see Muzone give Omar the evidence. The evidence, which of course was the gun that used to kill Stringer. The big thing to take away from the scene is the Dante Omar dynamic from the standpoint of Omar's previous boyfriend basically was killed and didn't give up Omar. Dante takes a couple, punches to the face or whatever and gave up Omar. So that to me was the big thing that I took from this scene in regards to their relationship moving forward. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that's spot on.
We go to McNulty and Colvin. Colvin gives McNulty the address to Avon's wartime lair. Says, "Hey, this is the last bit of police work. Could be the last bit of police work in a long and storied career." And of course, McNulty compliments compliments Colvin on this being a hell of a tip, and we see them exchange, not exchange, but see them give him that particular information. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Set up.
So we go to Cuddy. Cuddy is at the boxing gym. He's with his student, with the kids. They're watching the Ali Patterson fight. Of course, Ali, his mom, they were both champions at one point in their career. And this fight, I was saying this fight was in the 60s. And one of the kids, of course, questions Patterson's art because he was getting his ass whipped. And immediately Cuddy checks the kid and says, "Look, anybody that can step into that ring has a lot of heart, has heart. You don't question your heart if you can step into that ring." One of the kids goes and I think it was Justin and starts punching the bag as they're watching the fight. So we see Cuddy continue to live his best life from the standpoint of doing what he wants to do and doing what he loves to do in regards to the boxing. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, just kind of like drawing that parallel of like struggle to the struggle of the boxers to the struggle of the kids that are coming. So as you said, they're setting things up with scenes like that.
We go back to the detail with the detail along with Perlman. They discuss Stringer's cell phone chips. McNulty tells Freeman about Colvin's tip in regards to Avon's safe house. They decide that they should raid Avon's safe house. And McNulty says, hey, won't make up for Stringer, but Freeman says it will do. So that plan is they put that into motion. What were your thoughts on this scene as they're discussing? Like it begins with everybody, and then McNulty pulls. Now this is a big foreshadowing too, because everybody's involved in this as far as discussing this case and the fallout of the Stringer getting murdered and what have you. And then when McNulty makes a key statement, he says, well, Freeman says, careful man, when he shows him the chips, and he says, yes and no. McNulty says, yes and no. And then he pulls Freeman aside into a room and tells him about the fact that Stringer gave up Avon before he was killed, before he was murdered. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, I think also everything you said, absolutely. And I think also another important piece was them finding out that Stringer had so many chips and that it actually didn't really matter about like how they connected the network. They were probably never going to get him. So that made like this like the for real like only opportunity to get at Avon or get to higher levels of the organization.
Yeah. Well, and they mentioned it in the scene because they mentioned it, the fact that Avon, that McNulty mentions the fact that he guessed that Avon would probably never would ever touch a cell phone. So he did mention that earlier in the scene that, hey, this is the raid on the safe house was our only shot. So to your point, so that's absolutely true from that standpoint. And again, pay attention to that McNulty pulling Freeman aside. That is a big foreshadowing for the future. With those two, Marla and Perlman. You see Perlman watching TV at the with the detail. He sees that Marla decides to run for city council, and she watches as Daniels is there. Plain husband. We know that they're not together, but he's putting on nice for public appearances' sake. And of course, Perlman is not happy about this as she watches them on television. As she watches those two on television. What are your thoughts?
Set up.
Marlo, Chris, and Vincent at the rim shop. Vincent, of course, can't believe that somebody took out Stringer Bell. He's saying that it wasn't you. He can't believe that. He's surprised from the standpoint of the fact that it wasn't Marlo, and he basically asked the question: if it wasn't Marlo, then who? And Marlo's like, look, it doesn't matter who did it. I'm willing to take it. I'm willing to take the credit for it, and that is a big piece of the moving forward in terms of foreshadowing. That is a major and something I thought about, in rewatching the scene, because initially you don't think much of this scene outside of the fact that, hey, Marlo's like, hey, I'll take it to add to my reputation. But that moving forward, that is a major piece. The fact that Marlo is willing to take credit for a murder that he didn't commit to boost his own reputation. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It was huge that he was gonna put that, because that was gonna bring all of the other stuff that happens. And so I agree. Big move.
We go back to Amsterdam. We see Carver and Johnny Weeks. Johnny asking for $5. Carver, of course, says, why would I give you $5 in your current condition? And then Johnny pulls out, a $5 bill, and they move on from that standpoint. Also, we saw before that, we saw officers discussing Amsterdam and discussing the fallout, not the fallout, but discussing Amsterdam and discussing, because at this point the police haven't moved on Amsterdam yet. They're still waiting for the call from up top, from the mayor's office, and they still haven't moved on it. But the cops are talking about, when they do move on it, who's going to take the fall. And they mentioned Colvin, and to a lesser extent, without in name, they almost basically they look at Carver as well. They look Carver in but without mentioning his name as somebody that could possibly take the fall. So that was the interesting part about that particular scene. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree.
So we go to Kima. Kima, of course, is despite the fact that she's back in the house with Cheryl, their relationship, of course, is basically is basically a done deal. Kima is cheating with another girl, and she gets a phone call from Cheryl. She refuses to answer the phone and refuses to answer the phone. So that just shows you where they were at in terms of their relationship. So Kima going, a little McNulty from that standpoint. Any thoughts on that scene?
No, shut up. You pretty much said everything.
We go to McNulty and Bunk. They're at that one of their normal drinking spots outside the bar. They're on the train tracks. Again, McNulty is despondent, continues to be despondent and depressed, not drinking a lot. You have Bunk kind of teasing him about his lack of drinking, and Bunk then starts to talk about the murders. Discusses the murders, and of course he talks about. I mentioned earlier in this episode at the beginning when Bunk saw these shell casings, he kind of makes that connection with possibly thinking that Omar could have been involved in both of these, in both of those murders. McNulty again in that moment. McNulty also covers for Kima, as Cheryl calls him. That's going back to an episode we did, the episode earlier in the season when they both were in the hotel room and talking about those extraditions and that from that standpoint. So he covers for her, covers for Cheryl, covers for Akima, and then he tells Bunk he's tired, and he tells him, let's go home. And they also discuss, what the current standing of the city, saying they're going to go past 300 murders. Marlo being the heir apparent. As he tells Bunk that Marlo's the heir apparent. So this is mainly carrying on the theme of McNulty, kind of shifting his mindset and shifting his mindset. So it kind of played on that, and also a big part in continuing to build on that Omar Bunk connection. What were your thoughts on this thing?
Yeah, you named it. It's continuing that McNulty kind of dynamic and showing that this is another shift in his behavior. Normally he'll be drunker than Bunk, and he's actually the more sober, reflective one.
We go to Freeman and Prez. Freeman and Prez meet up to discuss. We're discussing his case. Freeman says, basically tries to talk him into fighting the case, saying that you can fight it and probably win. Prez, of course, Prez is done. He tells Freeman, I'm not sure I was supposed to be a cop. Not sure that I was supposed to be a cop. And Freeman responds, well, what were you supposed to be? And then that, of course, will lead us to our next part of where Prez's narrative goes, with which we'll see in future seasons or in next season. But the key part of that was what were you supposed to be in terms of that question. by one Freeman. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, this is a big time setup for next season. But just like I think an overall reflection of this episode. If there was going to be an epigraph that I liked, it would have been this one right here, because I think that's what is asking all of his characters in this final episode.
What were you supposed to be?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, and also, Freeman has been, kind of played on that mentor-mentee relationship that we've seen often in this show. Butchie Omar, the Deacon, and Deacon and Coben, and certainly, Prez respects Freeman a lot, somebody he can confide into. So it kind of played upon that as well. With those two in terms of their relationship. We go to the detail in Perlman. So McNulty tries to sell Daniels on raiding Avon. He tells him that Stringer was the source of information, and he convinces him. He convinces Daniels. And then Daniels goes to work on getting a warrant for the safe house. Daniels tells his people, let's stay on that safe house to see when Avon arrives and see, who's there, who's not. What are your thoughts on this particular scene and on McNulty saying that Stringer was the source of information?
I mean, it's set up in later scenes, both of those.
So we go back to Amsterdam. So Amsterdam is still in full swing, and finally all the news reporters come down there, not just an individual reporter. A bunch of cameras come down, and it finally gets broadcast. On television, and you saw Carcetti and Gray being interviewed on site. The one reporter says he had kind of regrets not reporting it because he could have had it a week ago. So he gets burned from that standpoint, and now now the shit has hit the fan, because now it is on display. In terms of it's absolutely on display, and you see Royce and the chief of staff watching the coverage, and Royce shaking his head and basically saying, "What was I thinking?" What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yep, the scene said it all. What was I thinking?
So we go to Sidner and Kima, sitting on Avon's safe house, watching, counting who's coming in and who's coming out. Of course, that will set up for a major scene coming up in later on in the podcast. Royce and Burrell. So Burrell comes in to Royce's office, and initially you're thinking that, all right, Burrell was at a major disadvantage, but he completely turns the tables on Royce. Says basically, look, I'll put it out there that I didn't have the necessary resources, that I was told to he almost in a way blackmails Royce, and forces him to get his give him his full term as commissioner. And in return, Burrell says, I will take the hit. I will put as much as I can on, of course, Bundy Coben. But I'm your mayor. I'm your commissioner for the full term. Probably one of the smartest things Burrell's done ever in the show, to be honest with you. So that was a clever move, and Burrell showed himself to be a worthy politician, more than worthy politician in terms of from that standpoint. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, Rel playing that game for real in this one.
Yeah, yeah, he kind of took. Yeah, he was playing the game. I give Burrell credit on this one because he walked in that office completely vulnerable and seemingly having no power, and walked out with basically all the power.
Yep.
And force the mayor to basically give in to what give him not only taking it. I mean, he's going to take the commission. The commissioner's going to take. Burrell's going to take the hit, but that hit is certainly worth a full term of being commissioner. So he was a big winner from that standpoint. So we go to Burrell and Rawls. Burrell finally gets the call to move on Amsterdam after negotiating that little deal with with Mayor. So they moved on Amsterdam. So fine, he tells Rawls, time to move on Amsterdam, and they move on Amsterdam and completely shut it down. As Rawls is playing some music from I forgot the movie. I think it was Apocalypse Now. And he says over the top, and we see cops arresting little hoppers. We see. I don't know if you noticed. Did you see when the cop punched the girl in the face? Did you notice that?
No, I didn't notice that particular.
Yeah. It definitely stood out. It definitely stood out this particular time. The girl, he takes her down to the corner, or to the curb, and then she's face forward. He punches the girl in the face. So that definitely stood out. But they basically completely shut down Amsterdam, and we see just a bunch of people, a bunch of drug dealers and a bunch of crackheads just scattering all over the place as Bundy Colvin's experiment now is up in ruins. What are your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah. Just total takedown.
So we go to Snoop and Fruit. So Snoop is telling a story to a bunch of the mid-level dealers that the fact that Chris killed Stringer and the fact that Stringer was begging for his life, saying how much money he was going to give Chris, and says it was beyond pathetic, or more than it was saying it was pathetic. So he has them laughing about that, and then you see Slim Charles spots Marlo at the rim shop, along with another Barksdale soldier in the car. He spots Marlo at the rim shop. What are your thoughts on this scene?
Setup.
So we go back to Avon at the wartime lair. Or no, Avon's he's not at the safe house yet. Avon's back at the funeral parlor. And again, he's still, basically despondent. He does allow Shamrock to walk in the room. Shamrock saying, hey, Slim, says that Slim Charles has the eye on Marlo. And at the rim shop, we waiting for you, waiting for you. It says, Avon says, reluctantly, hey, go ahead, I'm right behind you. And pulls out a gun, pulls the gun out the drawer. And, Avon is still Avon from that standpoint, that, even though he's definitely was devastated by what transpired with Stringer, he still is willing to kill Marlo, which was willing to kill Marlo. So he pulls out his gun and walks out the room as he heads to make a next move. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, this is him getting ready, big time, kind of a big time setup, honestly.
Yeah. So we go to Rawls, and the chief of staff. Of course, they're discussing, the chief of staff are discussing Amsterdam, And Rawls, one of the officers says that we have we have a dead body, and we find out that dead body, of course, is Johnny Weeks, who who just went too hard at the end of the day. It was just went too hard, and it couldn't function without Bubbles. Kind of a sad moment, to be honest, an underrated sad moment. I mean, we've been with this character for 3 seasons now. Seen him with Bubbles. We've seen him, in the beginning of the series, get the shit beat out of him by Bodie with the fake money. So, Johnny had a share of moments on this show. And what were your initial thoughts on seeing the end of this character arc in regards to Johnny Weeks?
I'm going to be honest with you, Real. I'm not that broken up at all about it. Yeah. Yep. He was there. He died as a character.
Yeah, but it's also also speaks to again what we spoke about in regards to where Bubbles is going. So I kind of speaking to that as well in terms of Bubbles, the direction that Bubbles is headed with no Johnny. Signer and the detail continue to. Signer and the detail finally arrive at Avon's safe house. They see Avon and a bunch of the soldiers go into the safe house, and at this point, that they are waiting for waiting on some more officers and waiting on Daniels to make his move to get the go ahead to make the move. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, getting ready for the set up for the big raid.
Colvin. So we go back to Colvin. Colvin loses his job, of course, from John Hopkins, and the guy who hooked him up with the job told him specifically that it was Burrell that made the call to get him ousted, and basically saying, so this is the collateral damage for allowing for legalizing drugs. So there was going to be some collateral damage from that standpoint. So this was the beginning of that for Colvin. In terms of that, certainly there was more to come. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is, like you said, collateral, and then this is also direct consequences of his actions.
Yeah, no question. The detail, we get to the detail, so they're still waiting outside the safe house, Avon safe house. Herc arrives along with another officer, and they complain initially about the fact that you guys are the only persons, basically like this, you were the only ones that we get in terms of backup. So, but they hadn't heard, of course, on the Hampshire raid. Herc reminds them that Buddy Coven's experiment blew up, and you're lucky that you just got us to. And of course he teases McNulty and Kima, saying, "I told you that Avon was out." Remember, Herc was the first cop that saw Avon.
He did, yeah, he did.
Oh. So, I fucking told you. So Herc, for once, Herc was right. He told him that Avon was out when they thought that he didn't know what he was talking about in that initial episode when Avon got out, or when Avon was spotted. So this, of course, is a setup for a major scene, probably the scene in this entire episode that's coming up. We go to Carcetti and Teresa DiGastino again. DiGastino, she's giving him a strategy in regards to the council meeting that's going to be coming up. She said specifically, save the best questions for Tony Gray. He needs to shine even more than you, as he's typing his notes about Amsterdam and what have you. What were your thoughts on that strategy, and what were your thoughts on that strategy that she was giving him?
Yeah, I mean, it's consistent with what they've said this entire time. And the reason they need Tony Gray to shine is because they need Tony Gray to split the black vote.
Yep. Yeah, question about it. So we get to the big scene, Avon in the detail. So um, Avon, as Avon's in his office, um, Sapper or Gerard, not Sapper. Gerard walks in. Gerard, of course, with the dreads, the one that was with Cuddy and Cuddy, all those particular scenes earlier in the season. He tells them that Slim Charles has a drop on Marlowe, and all of Marlowe, the most of Marlowe's muscle has rolled out. So at that point, Avon's like, okay, that's doesn't say it, but he has his gun, tucks his gun in, and is ready to go take out Marlowe. Then he hears the police knocking on the door, and in this moment, you have now you have about at least, I would say, anywhere from 10 to 15 guys that were in that wartime safe house, all armed, ready to go to battle with the police. And because one of his bodyguards, cocks the shotgun. Avon was like, no. Avon says, no, not the police. Kind of smiles, with a sly smile, realizes that it's over. He's been caught, and says, let him in. And as they're coming in, and before they come in, he says, if you ask me, y'all bunch of ugly motherfuckers shouldn't be playing with guns, shouldn't be using guns anyway. You know what I'm saying? So he kind of gets that little last joke in. So they come in, Ray, please come in. One of his guys, which Stringer predicted back last episode, tries to take the rap for all the guns. And then Daniel says, "Hey, you got a law degree." And then they, Avon is, at this point, and I'll dig into it, once when we get done talking about the scene. But Avon was ready to go. Avon was like, hey, was willing and able, had no resistance, was seemingly ready to go from that standpoint. Um, so he says, you only do 2 days, only do 2 days anyway. The day you walk in, and then the sapper finishes the rest of the day you come out. And McNulty, with one last dig at Avon, saying, well, between those 2 days, you can think on this, and he shows him the paper with the source of information, and he finds out that it was Stringer that indeed ratted on him. So one last dig from McNulty as they take in Avon and the rest of his muscle in that raid. And of course, Slim Charles, the phone was ringing the entire time. Slim Charles lets the phone ring, and then we see that Marlowe and Chris are leaving. So Slim Charles realizes that they missed their shot and tells his muscle tells the driver to roll out. Marlowe really Marlowe never knew how close he came to being taken out, which was kind of funny to me. Just that it was within minutes of this raid that Marlowe could have got taken out. What were your thoughts? Big scene, great scene. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah. Also, because you were talking about Stringer being ready to go, and so I think like to the point, like it was just like when he saw the paper that said that his man had given him up. It was just kind of like that final, like whatever fight that was going to be in him was probably gone at that moment, and which meant it was probably time for some new blood to take over.
Yeah, I think I mean, I like how this scene was written, because in a classic television scene would have been, I'm going out, blaze of glory. I'm going, you never take me alive, and all this shit. And in realistic terms, and the beauty of this show is, it's like Avon's like, no, I'm not going, I'm not getting into a gunfight with the police. I'll go back to jail, and be the man in jail per se. And I'm not. This is not like I'm not. I've been. I think overall those guys know that it's only going to end one way. Either I'm going to go to jail, or I'm going to end up dead. And you remember earlier in the season, Avon was like, he said, shit, I didn't think I was going to last this long when he started having a conversation with Stringer about, Marlo in the corners and what have you. They were having that back and forth. So Avon knew it was time. Avon, there's no two ways about it. Avon, even before he was arrested, even during this entire episode, I thought Wood Harris was brilliant in this episode in playing that. Once Stringer was taken out, he like we said, it was a wrap for the Barksdales. I get the sense that Avon thought that in the back of his mind as well, that it was a wrap for the Barksdales, and it was only a matter of time before before he either got caught or even got killed by Marlo per se. But either way, I think in Avon's mind that he thought it was time. We go to Rawls, Coben, and Burrell. So they tell Coben, like, you're gonna fall how we want you to fall, and you're not gonna go out on a major's pay. You're gonna go out on a lieutenant's pay. And basically everything that Coben thought that he was gonna get away with in beginning with Amsterdam is the complete opposite. Like, he thought that, hey, what can they do to me? They can't take away my pension. I'm going to go out. I got my 30, and all season long we heard Kobe all this shit. Oh yeah, my 30, and I'm going out. I go out, go out on majors pay. Got this John Hopkins job. So everything that Kobe thought he had in line, or thought that he had to fall back on, completely taken away from him in this episode. And they basically said, "Listen, which part of bend over do you not understand? You're gonna fall how we tell you to fall." And they would, both Burrell and Rawls were very clear about that. And they basically said, hey, if you don't fall the way we want you to fall, then we'll take some of your people with you. And of course, they know how loyal Coben is to his people. So they know that's the last thing that he wants. And they give them a credit from that standpoint. They were smart from that strategically. They knew that, yeah, we know that he'll take all this, and we know that they came in with the strategy. They recognized that he'd be willing to take all this, but he did not want other people to take the fall for his actions. So they completely used that against him. And and of course he has to fall the way they want him to fall. And we see the fallout and the consequences of his actions throughout the season. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah. I mean, you named pretty much everything. The consequences, man, significant.
Marlo and Chris. So Chris tells Marlo Avon's been locked up along with most of his muscle. Of course, Marlo, is happy to hear about that. And says, good time to get back on these corners, make that money. And of course, this is the pre-transition. We'll see the official transition later on in this episode, but this is kind of like the pre-transition of power from one drug kingpin to another. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly.
We go to Royce along with the drug czar. So the drug czar basically says, listen, your funding is going to be cut with this behind this Amsterdam shit. And Royce tries to say, hey, this was Royce along with the chief of staff says, this was a independent choice of basically an out of control officer. So Royce is trying at this point he's going from spin control to damage control in regards to Amsterdam. So found that interesting as he's discussing with the drug czar from Washington D.C. who has came down to tell him that, hey, we could take hundreds of millions of dollars of funding with what has transpired with this Amsterdam situation. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it's why Royce's chief of staff was so frustrated this entire time, because it ultimately didn't matter if Royce could have sold it to the people of Baltimore. The fact is the federal government would never stand for it. And so it was dead on arrival. there's no reason for him ever to wait at all, ever. And that's what was frustrating. And you saw he was straightening his tie, dry mouth. Yeah, he was shook.
Yeah, no. At this point, he's playing. He's on not the defensive, but this is damage control at this point, and so he's in a position of vulnerability without question. You have Cuddy and the boxers. So Cuddy loses his boxers. One of the kids says, "Hey, Marlo got his package back up," and Cuddy is not back to square one, but somewhat back to square one in regards to not having any boxers at this point. So kind of a minor setback for Cuddy. Also, it shows you in regards to Marlo of how like Avon that really had taken him down a couple of notches. Like he goes from running the corners to like his package not even being really on the street like that. So that in terms from that standpoint, the police had perfect timing in regards to taking down Avon to get allow Marlo to really put his package back out there, because that kind of stood out to me when he says when the youngin says Marlo got his package back. What were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that also speaks to the game is back in action now, right? Like the reform that Coven tried to bring has failed, and so now everything's going to shift back to the way that it was, and the way that it was. The reason why you had all these youngins just running around was because there was only one. There was limited opportunity. Let's just say it. Just put it like that. Now, with the game back to regular, there's plenty of opportunity, and so that's just one more way in which, as the game, as they call it, the game shifts back to normal, that is going to impact everybody, particularly kids. Pay attention.
Yeah, no, that was a big, definitely some.
Just like you're saying. Like we know this episode is a setup for next season.
Yeah, that was a big part of that. And to your point, the game is back to normal because now no Amsterdam. You have, you have transitioned from one drug kingpin to another, and from that standpoint, everybody's back on the corners now. And we'll talk about that more in the montage towards the end of the episode. Royce and Watkins. So Delegate Watkins wants Burrell out, but of course he doesn't know that what Burrell pulled with Royce earlier in this episode. Royce says, you know what? Royce says no, he's going to keep Burrell and going to cut Unetta Perkins loose and give Marla Daniels her shot. So Royce in that moment, Royce is doing some politicking, trying to keep Watkins somewhat happy, because even though he knows Watkins can't stand Burrell, he understands that Watkins is the mentor of Marla Daniels. So Royce was kind of, Royce says, Royce knows he has to keep Burrell, but at the same time, he has to toss Watkins a bone from that standpoint by giving his mentee, I should say, a shot, which he does. So, from that standpoint, smart move by Royce from that standpoint in regards to cutting Perkins loose. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, politics. They really showing all parts of it.
Yeah. So Comstat, we go to Comstat with Coben. Coben again takes the hit, takes all the embarrassment, and it gets to a point to where he loses his rank. His lieutenant Mello, of course, takes his position, and it got to a point to where he gets so upset to where he repeats Stringer's last words in saying, "Get on with it, motherfucker." So I found that that you had the two reformers having the same last words per se, as they are both, in essence, executed. Stringer, Stringer
Yep.
literally executed, and of course, Colvin's career has been executed. So,
Yep.
oh yeah, Burrell and Rawls, coming at you at the same time, which is never can be painful when those two are on the same page coming at you, and we see Bunny Colvin. We see the last of Major Colvin. We'll see him, of course, in the future, but we see the last of Major Colvin. Let's see.
Yeah, tough day at the office. This is a tough one. Yeah, no, you nailed it right on the head. It was a public execution of his career. Hence the same language. Yeah, I have nothing to add.
Bunk. So we see Bunk back at the Western. We see Squeak, Bernard, and a couple and everybody that was on the wire, that was caught up on that wire. Freeman tells everybody that they heard on the wire. Shamrock also. We see Shamrock in the interrogation room talking to Keyman. It looked like Shamrock was telling everything from the looks of it. Like he wasn't holding anything back. McNulty talks to Bodie, and Bodie gets off with he uses the Amsterdam entrapment to get away, which is good move by Bodie. Good for Bodie. Bodie was like, y'all let us y'all let us sell there. Y'all the ones that let us sell there. It's like you call me with a G-Pack. Oh, Bodie doesn't have a law degree, but Bodie in that moment was used every resource known to man to get himself out of the jam. And says, even McNulty was impressed from that standpoint, saying, "Kid's got a point." And Perlman, you can see how annoyed Perlman was. Perlman was so annoyed with that. But Bodie gets away as everybody else in the Barksdale organization goes down. Bodie and Slim Charles were amongst the last standing. What were your thoughts on this scene?
What was he said, isn't that some of that contraction?
Contraction.
Yeah, he said yeah. No, it was an awesome scene. Yeah. I really enjoyed it, really appreciated it, well acted, very, very, very funny.
And again, this is it's a call back to that, to when they busted Bodie with the G-Pack before McNulty and Kima knew, and Signer was there too, knew of Amsterdam. If you go back to that episode, I believe it was episode 6 or 7, when they, or maybe earlier in the season, when they were headed to Amsterdam, Bodie and a couple of his, a couple of Barksdale drug dealers. So we go to Burrell and Daniels. So Burrell playing golf, feeling good about himself. He's a full-time commissioner now. So why not practice on the old golf, the fake golf course. Lets Daniels know that he's been promoted to major, and also asked Daniels if he could tie his case into the Bunny Colvin case. Daniel says he doesn't think so, but we'll see how that plays out later on in this episode. Burrell tells him that his wife, she wins. She's going to win regardless. So great, as bad of a day as it was for Colvin, great day in the office. Great day in the office for one Urban Burrell, and also Cedric Daniels.
Yeah, absolutely.
What were your thoughts on this scene, on this exchange between Burrell and Daniels? A friendly exchange for one. Not too many.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is I just like the way that Daniels handled when he asked him, is there any way we can tie it to your thing? He's like, I don't see how. Right. I just like the way that he played that.
Yeah. Colvin and McNulty, they meet at the Western, outside the Western, drinking over a couple of beers. they discuss the case in the future. They also discuss Stringer Bell. McNulty, of course, says, I put Stringer's name on the paperwork to kind of, tidy up things. And, Coleman, of course, calls him out, basically says, always take, or you always taking those shortcuts. And, and McNulty says, looks like you took a few of your own. So they're kind of going back and forth a little bit. And they throw the beer cans on top of the roof. And then we get to see the thousands, and I'm not exaggerating, seemingly maybe hundreds, not thousands, but hundreds of beer cans that have been thrown on top of that rooftop. It was, endless amounts of beer cans thrown on top of that rooftop. As we see these two characters discuss, their future and discuss, kind of, wrap up with the conversation. What were your thoughts on this exchange?
There were definitely a lot of beer cans on that roof. I could see where you would go thousands.
Maybe, yeah,
yeah,
probably was, yeah, it was a lot.
There was a lot. I can definitely see where like both characters were coming from. So I like that, and I remember when I was just like watching it and thinking about it. Just this time, I was just like, it's very cool to see two flawed characters talk about their perspectives through their flaws, and through like what they've done wrong, instead of trying to like one up each other like on like a heroic ideal or something like that. They're both like really talking about how they screwed up and like this is how flawed I am. They're like almost like one upping each other in their flaws. I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, there definitely were a number of flaws to one up each other on. We go to Daniels and Perlman. They're at dinner celebrating. They can finally go public with their relationship. Daniels tells her about that Marla is going to get she's going to get what she wants, and we can go public. And of course, they celebrate over some wine, some wine, and they now now don't have to hide their relationship or worry about. She doesn't have to worry about Daniel's playing husband for appearance's sake. So that part is over from that standpoint. Any thoughts on that scene?
No, you named it.
McNulty and B.D. Russell. Of course, B.D. Russell from season 2. We saw her in the picture that he still has in the details office. In that episode, of course, when Lester called him out for not having a life. So he goes and meets with her, and he tells her that he finally closed a chapter in his life and not just a case. And mentions that he was like pouring into an empty cup. Was pouring into an empty cup for a lot of his life, and seemingly headed in a different direction, which he is. He says that he wants to meet her kids. And he made one key statement. He says, "Things that make me right for this job make me wrong for everything else." And truer words have never been spoken by any other character on this show in regards to McNulty. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, I mean, like I thought it was like the first like for real like change that I felt with McNulty, particularly like that end line of like, nah, not a drink. Let me come in and meet your kids. Like I actually felt like the shift of the character.
So we get to Carcetti and Burrell and Rawls at the council meeting, and Burrell, of course, puts most of the blame on Colvin, and as expected, as we knew he would do, takes the hit. And by the way, he did tie in the Daniels case with Amsterdam. By the way, even despite the fact that Daniels said that he didn't see a connection. That politics. We know Burrell is a savvy politician, so he found a way to mix in that case with Colvin, with Daniels' case, basically saying that we delayed jumping out on Amsterdam because we didn't want to blow Daniels' case. So use that as an excuse. We see Carcetti finally take all the advice that Teresa DiGaschino has been giving him all season in regards to not going directly at Burrell and Rawls and speaking about the big picture in terms of what was wrong with the city. And he basically gave, his mayor speech. I call it his mayor speech, and everybody was impressed except Tony Gray, because he realizes at that moment that Carcetti is running for mayor. Delicate Watkins is impressed by the speech, and even Teresa DiGaschino seemed to give her, by her facial expressions, seemingly was improved, not improved, but impressed by Carcetti's speech. So Carcetti finally learning the lessons of going of taking it to that next level of politics. He sound like a mayor. He sound like a mayor and not an angry councilman. So like the first time in this season. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, that was the perfect way to say it. Like that entire scene was about him finally getting his mayoral instincts in the right place. And he shifted from being an angry councilman, just like you said, to sounding mayoral.
We go to Daniels and McNulty. So McNulty, McNulty leaves the major crimes unit, even though, and it says, even though Daniels was willing to give him another chance. Daniels says, "Hey, I gotta trust my people, and if you're not gonna be," and he cuts Daniels off in mid-sentence, says, "Yeah, no, you're right. I'm going in another direction. I'm going, I think I'm going back to the Western. Western sounds like home." And I found it interesting because it goes to show you, and we see this in sports all the time. If you produce, all is forgiven when you produce. And the bottom line is they got Avon Barksdale's in jail. Daniels is a major. So Daniels is like, "Hey man, yeah, sure, you can come back. You can come back. You can come back to the major crime unit, despite all the backstabbing and insubordination, you know what? You close this case, you can come back." So I found that to be the interesting part of that particular scene with those two. What were your thoughts?
It's very interesting that you read the scene that way, because I did not read that scene that way at all. Daniels is essentially saying at the very beginning of it is that I would like to this was a heck of a case. I would like to ask you back as someone who could identify a case like this, but I have to be able to trust my people. So the way that I read it was he was giving McNulty an opportunity to say, "Sorry, this is why I'm going to," he was giving him an opportunity to try to convince him that he could be trusted. McNulty basically was saying, "Nah, thank you. No. The words he literally said was, 'Thank you, Captain. That's more than fair.'" So more than fair that you need to trust your people. And this is not something he was willing to even try to engage in. And he already had made up his mind. He was going in a complete different direction anyway. So they could just save that conversation because there was no need to have it. McNulty wasn't coming back, and the captain couldn't have him back, or the major couldn't have him back without him being able to convince him that he could trust him, which neither McNulty could do.
Yeah, I can see how you can read it that way. I think I still think I'll say this. I think if McNulty would have been like, "Yo," if McNulty would have, to your point, would have said, "Hey, I apologize. I want to be a part of this unit. This unit is special and so on, so on." He could have came back. That's the way I take it.
But would any version of McNulty ever do anything like that?
Hell no. So that's why
No,
the scene is
so
great. No, but that's why the scene is
yeah,
that's why the scene is well written. It's great because to me,
yeah,
if to me fairy tale ending, the television fairy tale
yes.
ending would have been McNulty going back and saying and them running it back. So yes, that's why I love the scene from that standpoint. That
Each
there's no
character can end their relationship with the other with dignity.
yes, yeah, they walked away. Yes, they walked away with dignity, but knowing that they wasn't going that they couldn't work together like in that capacity moving forward. So from that standpoint, so so that's why I like the scene from that standpoint. That there was no, I wouldn't like if they would have had McNulty go back to the major crimes unit after all the shit he's done, and I'd be like, come on, man. Then I'd be what are we talking about here? So I wouldn't have, it wouldn't have been as realistic to me. And I've been that to me would have been like that's a television moment. That's a TV that had been cliche-ish television writing for McNulty to go back into that unit, the way he had, despite the way he had shitted on Daniels all throughout the course of this season, in particular. So I love how that from that standpoint, how that scene was written, and it would have went totally against this change that McNulty, this direction that's this narrative and change that McNulty is headed. Part of being in that unit was taken away, was hurting him from a standpoint where he couldn't protect himself from himself. So he needed to get out of that unit. It's not the unit's fault, it's him, of course. But he needed to be somewhere else from that standpoint in order to make this change believable. Um, Carcetti and Gray. So Gray recognized that Carcetti was running for mayor. And he tells Carcetti, says to Carcetti, seems like you're running for something. Seems like you're running for something. And then Watkins, of course, walks up to Carcetti and says, you showed me something today. So certainly a major some foreshadowing moving forward to season 4 in regards to those three characters. We'll see plenty of those three characters in the next season. Cuddy and Fruit. So Cuddy, needs boxers, and he recognizes that everybody has returned back to the corner. Things have returned back to in regards to the drug trade. Guys on the corner, police are busting taking heads, doing that, and what have you. So Cuddy sees not Fruit. Well, Cuddy sees Justin and the other one, the other kid, I forgot his name, but mainly this was Justin with the back who had the hat backwards with the Herc scene, that Justin. And Cuddy says, I thought y'all was supposed to be in training. They eating potato chips, some Utz potato chips, by the way, which you ever want some good chips, strongly recommend Utz potato chips. So he says, thought y'all was supposed to be in training. And at that moment, of course, Fruit doesn't even know Cuddy's there. He walks out laughing and then recognizes Cuddy, sees Cuddy. So they have a moment and a brief moment, kind of like I don't want to call it a stare down, but eye to eye contact. And Justin said, Cuddy says, we'll be there at 3:30 good. He says, what time, coach? What time you need us to be there? And Cuddy says, yeah, 3:30 would be good. And as we see Cuddy walk away, they pan the camera to Fruit, who just looks embarrassed and looks ashamed, knowing that Cuddy could have taken him out earlier in the season. So he takes his head off and rubs his face, and says, tells them to get back to work. Very very powerful scene, just well acted by Cuddy and whoever the guy who plays Fruit. Both of those actors did a great job in that moment. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, very cool scene, very cool callback. And just kind of like the overall dangers of being in the game, even tangentially, as Cuddy's trying to be, like in terms of like supporting these boys with programs and opportunities. I mean, with programs outside of school. That's going to bring you toe to toe with somebody you might have had a past with.
Yep. Yeah. No question about it. So we then get to the closing montage. Solomon Burke, Bass Train was the song. We see Gray and Carcetti campaigning. We see McNulty as as a beat officer, walking the beat in the Western, smiling. We see Amsterdam's wreckage. We see Cuddy back in the gym with some kids. Carver watching with approval, looking on. Again, major foreshadowing. Carver, Cuddy in the gym with the kids. So that's something to watch out for, to look out for. Of course, Donette, who we hadn't seen in a while, crying as she's lost another boyfriend, lover. Yeah, rough episode for Donette too. Even rough episode for her. She see her crying as her kid is playing with his toys. We see a picture of Stringer and D'Angelo. And basically, I guess that was just absolutely, that just showed the price of the game. That standpoint with that quick moment with Donette. Omar getting rid of the evidence with the Biggie shirt on. Of course, Michael K. Williams is from Brooklyn, by the way. Bodie all alone as Marlo controls the corners. Bodie is kind of foreshadowing for Bodie, kind of like a man, without an organization on his own. So that definitely remember that for next season as he puts his hoodie on. We see the detail take down the board and clear out the office. We see with Stanfield and Barksdale boxes. Avon in court, as we see Avon in court, he looks over to Brianna, gives a brief, smiles as he has a brief little, semi smile. Certainly he was happy to see her, but then he turns around and she's gone. And then he sees Marlo and Chris as they come into court. Marlo gives the Warriors a nod of respect. Avon acknowledges that sees that that's Marlo, and then the crown has been officially passed from Avon to Marlo. Very great montage, and they do a tremendous job with these end of the season montages. But I frankly, this one is now I'll say it now. This one is my favorite out of all the 5 seasons in regards to the montages with the music and how they wrapped up the season. What were your thoughts on this montage?
Yeah. I mean, like, I agree with you. They all do. The montages are very cool at the end of every season. I'm definitely not willing to call 3 my favorite yet. I gotta see the other 2. I can't remember that well between all 5 montages. Yeah, I mean, it's so the Wire does a great job of summing up where they are, as well as tipping their hat to knowing what's going on in the future. All right, a little bit of a behind the scenes on The Wire. At this point in time, the other thing, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is what makes this series so special and so unique, is at this point in time, there's not like an overarching guarantee for X amount of seasons. Quite literally, season 3 could be the end of the series. They actually fought really, really hard to get a season 3 because they wanted to wrap up the Stringer and Avon story. Like, they needed to wrap that up. But if season 3 was going to be it, that would have been fine with them, because that could have been the end of the show. And so I say that to say the degree of difficulty here is you're tipping your hat and nodding. You're ending a series potentially and tipping your hat and nodding to a season that might not ultimately come. So the degree of difficulty is very high.
Yeah, to your point. So this season was clearly written as, even though Simon, in even though Simon had 5 seasons in mind, the way, to your point, this season was clearly written as possibly being the last season. There's no question about it.
Well, I mean, like at the time, like The Sopranos was the ratings juggernaut and was the one that was getting all of the attention. The Wire, for as good as we all know it is, and how culturally significant it's become over the years, at the time was just a lowly rated show that critics really loved.
Yes.
And so that did not guarantee another season. That's the big point. That season 4 was not guaranteed. That was not a thing that was like definitive. So whereas like Sopranos at the time, let's say, is getting begged for more and more seasons, they could write with kind of like the advanced knowledge of all of this is actually going to happen.
Right.
The Wire didn't have that. I mean, didn't have the luxury of the knowledge of the show actually happened. But to your point, in terms of like how the seasons were mapped out and what David Simon, the overarching vision had, they continued on with their vision. But a big part of their vision was that season, like that arc of Stringer and Avon had to be complete.
Yeah,
they had to complete that arc.
Yeah, they had to. Yeah, that had to get that. To your point, that had to get wrapped up, and they because they didn't. I'm not gonna say they sacrificed season 2. What they did, so they going back to season 2. They put that on the shelf so that the Stringer and Avon arc could stretch out to 3 seasons, and it worked out perfectly with going towards the docks, and which allowed them to to kind of culminate with the Avon Stringer in season 2, along with D'Angelo as well, even though he died in season 2, in regards to what transpired in season 3. So
they took a risk in season 2. They did not do season 2 to elongate for there to be a season 3 arc in there. They took a risk on season 2. That's why season 2 will always be one of my favorites, but that's why it always stand out, is because the natural progression of the show and the way it was hitting would have been what season 3 is to be season 2. So they took a huge risk with season 2 in the way that format and the story that they wanted to tell. But with that being said, as much as I applaud them for that risk, ratings were not great. And so then a potential season 3 had to be very, very much discussed. And a very big part of that discussion was that Stringer and Avon, Wood Harris, and
Idris Elba.
Why am I blanking?
Idris
Elba were returning, and they were returning back to the streets and all that. So that was a part of the negotiating process. But also another very big part of the process was that they had to finish out that arc. If it would have been unsettling and unsatisfying for the creators to end if the series would have gotten canceled at the end of season 2. That would have been unsettling and unsatisfying because that was not an end point. They were not done with the characters yet. With season 3, they designed it so that all the big arcs were done in tied up. All of the characters we had met and had grown, like they were at an end point. They could be at potential endpoints in their journeys, if not definitive endpoints in the case of Stringer Bell in their journey. And so if HBO had said, nah, we're not renewing y'all for another season, the creators would have been completely satisfied with where the series would have ended at the end of season 3.
No question about it. They which goes back to my original point as far as how challenging this episode was, and how tricky this episode was. This episode, is ranked in the top 10, so it does get its proper respect. And it absolutely is a top 10 episode. But this episode is probably better. It's probably better than what we realized, all things considering that it was following episode 11, and considering that everything that had all the payoffs and everything that had to go into to finalizing, telling this story arc. So yeah, very difficult episode, challenging episode to write from all the reasons you just mentioned. The last scene, Bubbles and Colvin. So we see Bubbles with a young protege, and I believe it was that same young boy that he met in Amsterdam. I think it was him. Anyway, he's helping Bubbles collect scrap metal. Of course, Bubbles is always looking for a hustle, and they run into Colvin, um, and they have a brief conversation. Bubbles starts talking about the memories of Amsterdam and what was going on, and Colvin says it's a good thing. So, and somewhat in a question form says it's a good thing, and Bubbles doesn't give a definitive answer to that question, but he did. But the important part is Bubbles says, you know what? I mean, I'm paraphrasing this. Things have gone back to normal. So that was the big piece of that conversation with those that brief conversation. As Bubbles says that things have gone back to normal in regards to coppers on the corners, police, and what have you. What are your thoughts as this scene wrapped up the season with Bubbles and Colby?
It's a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
Bubbles was talking about it from the Fiend's perspective. He's like, nobody, the police was letting you be, the hoppers wasn't banging on you. You could just copy a thing and be done with the night. So life is feeling really good for him. Other people's perspective, not so much. And now, the overarching point, of course, is what did all of that accomplish? Right. And the ultimate answer is in nothing. They're right back at
where one.
Bubbles is right back as where he started, and Colvin is worse off now than where he would have been if he just would have played out the rest of the time. And everything, to Bubbles' point, everything else is back to normal. So what ultimately was the point, right? Like what was the point of what was tried?
Yeah,
so that's a question that will be answered at another time.
Yeah, definitely about perspective, and getting back to one of our original themes, was it worth it? And a number of characters had to answer, a number of characters, basically asking themselves that question. It could be whether it's Stringer, whether it's McNulty, Avon, Colvin, Cuddy, Carcetti. So a number of characters we could pose that question to. Was it worth it? And getting in some of the things that I mentioned, I said, was it worth it? Also, in regards to Avon and McNulty, very, similar characters in regards to what their moods were throughout the course of this episode. Like these are two guys. Again, we focused this season on reform. A bunch of reformers, a number of reformers, a few reformers. But I found it interesting that this episode was kind of, dictated by two guys who came into the season as guys who seemingly were not trying to were part of these, status quo. Like they were going to be McNulty's going to be McNulty, Avon is going to be Avon, and at the end of the day, they find out that what they do or how they're living, it's not working anymore. Now Avon finds out he's end up, it cost him a trip, going to jail. McNulty, of course, can go about his business, per se. So I found it to be interesting that this episode was kind of dictated by those two, seemingly those two guys who were clearly not reforming, reformers, per se. And also in regards to the season overall, I think and I want to get your thoughts on this as well. Did it just, did the show just answer the question, hey, when it comes to this, you can be, the system, or the game will not stand before him, but there is possibilities certainly for self reformation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at what the show's argument is the show's argument is that reforming big, huge systems in isolation will never ever be a successful strategy. You just can't do it. But what you can do in isolation is you can reform yourself and look at your own actions and how your actions impact the larger system. And if enough people take that time to reflect and change their actions, then things don't happen the way that they continue to happen. That's actually how you get different pieces of the system to change. And the ones in this season that were outright failures were the ones that were built on lies. And you have to come at it from a place of truth and telling the truth.
No question about it. So we go to episode MVPs and Chardines, and we'll get to season MVPs and Chardines. First episode, who's your episode MVP?
Yeah, episode MVP will be Avon, and the Chardine will be McNulty and Amy Ryan. B Russell.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So why Avon MVP of the episode?
Avon MVP the episode because we just got to watch him go through so many emotions. Like Stringer got the most final consequence, but Avon Wood Harris has to play through, and the Avon character has to play through the emotional consequence of his actions. And he had to do it through the entire episode and then get through on the other side of it by the end of the episode convincingly.
Yeah. No, I try. So yeah, I definitely got some awards for Wood Harris's performance. And my MVP was it was a tough one. It was between Daniels and Burrell. I said Daniels. I had Daniels. I could easily win Burrell, but I had Daniels as MVP of this episode. I thought Daniels, just him navigating as a leader and just just all of it paying off with how he led the MCU and how he navigated that situation, with his wife, with Perlman. You can make a case. You can make a case it's more seasonal than even episodic. But I had Daniels as my episode MVP. Avon was the Chardine. Was my Chardine. Who was your Chardine? Oh, you said McNulty and Russell. Yeah, Avon was my Chardine.
Yep.
I thought Wood Harris was phenomenal in this episode. Just going through that emotion of being a kind of a aging gunfighter who doesn't have any bullets left in the gun, and who is ready for the next phase of his life, whether it had been death or whether it had been time in jail, which he ended up going to jail. Oh, speaking that brings me to a question I forgot. So getting back to that scene where Avon gets busted, they say Daniel says, McNulty says, you'll do the rest of your term, which is 5 years, the 5 years off the 7-year, his 7-year original bid. He only did 2 years. He said, you'll do the rest of your term. Daniel says, we'll seek to get you 25 to life on conspiracy to murder. Conspiracy to murder. Now, do you think that was conspiracy to kill D'Angelo or Stringer? Who do you think they were talking about in that moment?
I have to go back and watch. Real honestly, I never consider. Yeah, I have to go back and watch.
Um, season MVP season charting.
Whoa. Season MVP is um some combination of Bell, Avon. I mean, this is their season.
Yeah,
So they're both MVPs. There's no way you can split them up.
yeah.
Bell, Avon.
What about your season charting?
The season Chardine would probably be McNulty, if I'm being honest, because he goes
Oh, this
through
is shocking.
so much change throughout the season.
Interesting. Okay. Um, yeah, season MVP. I had Avon Stringer, the fall of the Barksdales, the whole. I think you expressed it perfectly, articulated perfectly in last episode with the whole the Greek tragedy and the tragedy of the Barksdales. That to me is the MVP of the season. The Barksdales tragedy. Um, to me, which again were driven by Avon and Stringer. Season Chardine, I had Cuddy.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like Cuddy from episode one until this final, until even this particular episode. I thought he was in a number of powerful scenes. Two of those, of course, with Avon and just his whole transformation. Also as a reformer as well. One last one before I let you go. What was the best scene to you in this season?
The best scene is without a doubt the last episode when Stringer when that gun blast goes off and Stringer realizes, it's about to go down. And that entire sequence, there's nothing like it.
Oh, so as when Omar shoots his bodyguard in that whole sequence, that sequence.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
The scene that stands out that when I was thinking about this, to me, I gotta go back. It goes back to early in the season. I love the Deacon and Colvin scene about the sweeping leaves on a windy day. That scene that stood out to that scene stood out to me. That whole regret, looking back on your legacy. That to me, that was to me the best scene of the season. So I think overall, again, this is actually a great season, without question, a classic season. I think that as the years have gone by, the season even ages even better, that much better as you rewatch it. And I definitely feel like even though I know that season 4 is the best season. I think as far as story arc, I think season 3 had the best story arc of all the seasons, to be honest with you. So great season. Definitely looking forward. To go. This goes without saying, as a educator and a fan of the show, looking forward to one season 4. Any last thoughts about season 3?
No, I mean you put a button on it. Let's go season 4.
Yeah, no, season 4. It's going to be special to say the least. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast, the Wire Remix. As always, thanks to one Robert Sapp.
All right, sir. You have a good one. Happy holidays to you.
All right, same to you, and I'll see you next time. That's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast. We are made it through 3 seasons. Looking forward to season 4. As always, and definitely I will have this episode up before the end of the night. As always, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. www.youtube.com/Real Deal Podcast. I will see you next time on this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast. I'm out.